Welcome to Successfully Depressed, and I'm your host, Kerry Finsan. It is time to learn how to navigate mental health in life and business. Today's guest has lived a very interesting life. He's been everything from a childhood magician starting at 12. He's been on the Netflix documentary Tiger King 2, the Doc Antle Story, and he's performed in over 10,000 different magic shows. He's also the founder and CEO of Life Skills Masters Class, where he teaches people how to master their own anxiety and stress. And that's what I'm really excited about talking today about, is just teaching people in the world about how to manage stress better. Stephen Diamond, welcome to the show.
Hi, Kerry. Thank you for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, Stephen, like I said, I did some research on you, and you have quite the background. I think you are the definition of successfully depressed. And that's in all the best manner, because you've been very successful, but you've been homeless. You've had some major childhood trauma, but you've traveled the world, and then you've come from that. And now you're teaching other people how to kind of work through some things that you worked through before. I just want to hear how you got to today. So what's kind of your background? What's your story?
Well, I'll tell you, Obsessive-Compulsive Disorder is an incredible thing. It's a double-edged sword because it makes you, in my particular case, I was a perfectionist. So everything had to be perfect. So I would rehearse endlessly for hours and hours and hours and hours a day, 12, 15 hours, and sometimes to the point to where my fingers would bleed. And so it's a double-edged sword. It's that vicious cycle that you're trapped in, you can't get out of, but it's also that disorder is what gave me the work ethic and taught me how to rehearse in a way that made me good at what I do. And so ultimately, when you're good at what you do, success will find you. And so I think I was a unique case of someone who learned very, very early on how to take my dysfunction and make it work for me in the best possible way.
Yeah, it's interesting. My first podcast interview was with Jill Anderson. She's a trauma coach. And so I learned about kind of the big T's and the little T's of trauma. And I would say that when you were a kid, you had definitely the big T's of trauma. Can you kind of talk about
Sure.
how you got into being a magician, and then obviously being a professional magician when you're 12? You're just learning about how to be a person at that point. And so, but you were a solopreneur and you're learning so many different things. So you're not really mature enough to know the world yet. I mean, I'm 42. I'm still not mature enough to know the world yet, but how did you get to that point? And how, I'm just really curious.
I'll tell you, I would say that I was a different kind of kid. I always looked at my magic career as a business. To me, it was a business, and that's how I viewed it. And I studied business very early on. I was very interested in making money when I was very young, but magic became the vehicle that I figured out that I could use to take me wherever I wanted to go. And you mentioned my appearance on Netflix, Tiger King. The story that I tell in Tiger King 2, the Doc Antle Story, is I'm in all 3 episodes. And that story began about the time when I figured out that I needed something that would set me apart from all of the other magicians that were out there. And when I met Doc Antle, we were both young kids. He's 10 years older than I am, but we were both young and inexperienced at the time. And we're talking about 1983, 84, in that time frame when we met. And it was during that period that I was beginning to figure out that if I had something that would set me apart from all the other magicians, I had the opportunity to really take this to the next level. And when I met Bhagavan and saw the tigers in his backyard, I was like, ding, that's it. And the rest, as they say, is history.
And that was in Virginia, right?
That's correct. Yeah,
and
we started the original facility that we had. We called it the zoo, even though it wasn't it wasn't open to the public. But we called it the Buckingham Zoological Park, and that was the original place. It was in a little tiny country town in Buckingham, Virginia. And the reason that Bhagavan located it there was because the animal laws were really, really laxed. And so we were pretty much able to get away with anything.
I have seen the whole documentary series of Tiger King 2, but I rewatched the first episode just to kind of refresh myself with the story again. And I know also that not far from there, I believe, is where the Yogaville was located. Correct. Is that correct?
Yep. Yeah, it's not too far away. We used to go there on a regular basis. And in the beginning, Yogaville was very different from what it is today. Now, today I'm told that it is a straight up cult. But back in those days when it first started, it really had innocent intentions. It was a place where people could come for spiritual growth. And they would teach yoga and meditation and healthy eating and healthy lifestyle principles and things like that, and teach you about controlling your mind and your emotions and things like that. It was a very different place back in those days. Towards the end of my association with Doc Antle, it began to get a little culty.
And so, were you a member of that, of the yoga?
I wouldn't call myself an official member, but we were there a lot because Bhagavan was very close with the guy who run the entire thing. His name was Swami Satchidananda. And he was kind of a Hindu guru kind of a guy, a very sweet, loving man, or at least he was always to me. All of my interactions with him were very positive, very life-affirming. We talked a lot about spirituality and that sort of thing. So I had nothing but great memories of him. Bhagavan had a very different relationship with him. Bhagavan had a mentor-mentee kind of relationship and looked at him for guidance in terms of pretty much everything. And so it was a really interesting time period because both Bhagavan and myself were trying to figure out where we fit in the world and how we fit in and that sort of stuff. And he was focused on building this animal empire, and I was focused on building a magic career. And the two of us kind of figured out that, you know, he figured he could use me for revenue and I could use him for the tigers. And it kind of worked out for a short period of time of about 10 years.
And it sounded like in the beginning it was a good relationship between you two.
It was. We got along very well in the beginning. We understood each other very well in the beginning. He was a different person in those early days than he is today. I think that one of the most interesting things about this whole story is the transformation that he made. And I kind of look at it as two highly intelligent people who were overachievers in their lives already. And one used their powers for good and one didn't. And it's really the tale of two parallel lives and what would happen just simply based on the decisions that you make in your life. And it's really interesting, 30 years later, really, it's even more than that. I've known Bhagavan almost 40 years. So, 30 plus years later, it's interesting to see how it's all worked out.
I really liked your parallel. There's the person doing good and the person doing, let's say, bad and taking advantage of people. I think when people are trying to better themselves, especially in a spiritual or mental or physical way even, that people can definitely be taken advantage of. And that's what I think is interesting about you, is that he took advantage of your good nature and everything. You eventually got away from working with him and you worked on your own and you grew this big career of being all over the world, which is amazing. You had your own issues and stuff that you couldn't overcome, but then over time, just with everything you learned, this culmination of life, you now created this life masterclass. So tell me a little bit more about the life masterclass and what it all entails.
This whole journey really started back in the days of the Buckingham Zoological Park. It was because of a lot of the trauma that I went through and experienced while working with Bhagavan that led me on this path of being stressed out and anxious and looking for answers. When I left that whole experience, and the reason that Bhagavan and I went our separate ways, aside from the fact that he tried to kill me, was...
Oh, didn't know that part.
Yeah.
Stop the presses. Let's come back to that one in a second here.
We'll come back to that in a second. But aside from that, the main issue I had was that I wasn't being paid. And so after a decade of doing free shows all over the world, and every job that you do with him, all the money goes to the animals and you don't get paid for it. At that point, I had to separate. And I got an opportunity to be on a children's television show that was syndicated throughout all of the Spanish-speaking world. 80 million people watched it every week. It was a children's TV show called Nube Luz.
Are you fluent in
word of Spanish, by the way?
Oh, okay.
And so the producers had me on. We were touring through South America. They had me on as a guest on the show, and the kids went wild. They never had an American magician on the show before. And it was a completely different style than what South American magicians do. And so the kids really resonated with it. The producers of the show came back and said, "You're a hit. Our audience loves you. We would love to have you on the show on a regular basis." So they offered me a deal, and I saw that as my way to get away from Bhagavan. And so I used that opportunity to leave. And that's exactly what happened. And that was in June of 1994. And
how old were you then?
Oh, God, I was like 23, I think, something like that. I'm 53 today. I'll be 54 in October. So, that's how it all started. That's how I separated. And so through all of that, I was dealing with a lot of heavy trauma, as you mentioned. There was a lot of really scary stuff that happened to me, not just at the hands of Bhagavan, but also prior to him in my own personal life. I had found my babysitter dead and hacked into pieces. I had some sexual trauma in my past and all kinds of things like that. So really, it was the perfect storm. But what saved me was my laser being focused on my magic career. Because when all else was going crazy in my life, I had that career that I dearly loved and could focus all of my energy in. And that's exactly what I learned to do, is harness the power of my mind and my emotions to block everything else out in the world and just focus on my magic career. So when things got crazy in my personal life, I just worked harder and focused more on my magic career. And strangely enough, through that process, and I didn't realize this is what I was doing at the time. In fact, I didn't realize this until some 20 years later when I was in therapy for it all. But what I really was doing was developing a very specific set of coping skills, which were unique to me. And I developed some unique strategies to handle all of this stress and anxiety and trauma that was going on in my life. And while being able to maintain my focus. And flash forward 20 years later, I'm in therapy, and I began telling my therapist about this, and he was just absolutely blown away. And he was like, "Stephen, this is amazing. You should be teaching this to people." And that was the first time that I ever thought about developing any kind of a course or a class. And at this time, we're talking about 2003, and that began my journey on investigating, maybe I do have some skills that could help other people. And I wrote a book that was published in 2007 called OCD, A Life Among Secrets. I actually have a copy of it right here. And I wrote this book. And inside the book, there's a whole section in here of pictures of me with all of the lions and tigers and all kinds of stuff, of my performing career, my family, things like that, me touring all over the world. And so in this book, Jane Pauley from NBC, you might remember her from the Today Show. Jane Pauley got a hold of my book and read it. And she called me one night at home. It was late at night. It was like 11:30 my time on the West Coast. I live in Las Vegas. She was in New York. And she called me late one night and said that she had read my book. She loved it and wanted to do an episode with me on her daytime talk show because she was getting ready to come out public for the very first time and reveal that she has suffered from bipolar her entire life, and no one knew it. And what she resonated with in my book was that laser focus. She did the same thing I did. And I discovered that a lot of high-functioning people do the same thing, is that they might be complete disasters in their personal life, but they're able to function to a very high degree in their professional life. And the reason is they use a series of coping skills that can be good or bad depending on how you use them. And we related on that level. So she had me and Howie Mandel on the show as guests. And after that show aired, I received tens of thousands of emails from people all over the world who resonated with the story that I was telling. And all of their emails had a similar theme, and it was, please help me. What can you do to help me? I'm suffering. I don't know. Please teach me. And this was the first time I ever experienced this, and I realized, oh my gosh, there are all these people, millions of people out there who are suffering like this, and maybe I can help them through the process. So I started looking for a resource to point these people to, and at that time, it just didn't exist. There was nothing out there like that. The internet was just becoming a thing, and e-commerce was just beginning, and so it really wasn't a thing at that time. So I created, you'll laugh, I actually have a copy of it here. I created a 4 CD audio course, CDs. Who even knows?
What's a CD? What's that?
No one even knows what those are today. But I created a 4 CD audio course called When Anxiety Attacks and started selling this online, and we sold hundreds of thousands of them.
Really?
And that became the very first iteration of what is now Life Skills Masterclass. And so since about 2009, I have just been creating a more in-depth version of it every few years. I update the course, and we just updated the entire thing during the pandemic. I shot the old course down, and we used to be all audio, and today it's all video.
Oh, nice.
So we took the course, we updated it, we expanded it greatly, and it's really much more in-depth today than it's ever been. And we vetted it with a team of doctors and psychologists, and once everything had been cleared, we launched the brand new course that is lifeskillsmasterclass.com in March of this year.
Well, congratulations on that. I mean, that's amazing. That to launch something like that and all the energy you put into it. I mean, I didn't realize that you had I knew you had the book, but I didn't know you had the audio CDs before, and then that you had this program, and then you redeveloped it. And then what I like about it is then you had experts look over your material. I think that's beautiful because we all learn on our own experiences, and we read and we find different ways to improve ourselves. But it's nice to hear an expert say what you should be doing over there. That yes, this is accurate and stuff, because there's a lot of those people out there that aren't that way, and they're just trying to make a quick buck. And obviously you're not, because you started something organically, and I think that's kind of like you put the good vibes out there in the world, and then the good vibes have been coming back to you, and having this course. It's been a very long journey.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I think anxiety, that's something that everyone has had, this collected trauma with the pandemic. And I know my anxiety has gone up over the last couple of years. With you being a performer, talk about anxiety. What did you do to calm yourself down? Did you breathe, exercise, or do meditation?
Yeah, there's a couple things. This is an interesting story. I get asked this question a lot, and it always shocks people to find out that entertainers, and I think any entertainer watching this right now will resonate with what I'm about to say, but you can be the most dysfunctional person in the world when that curtain's on the ground. But the second that curtain goes up, something just snaps. It's like flicking a light switch, and you become that entertainer, and the entire rest of the world falls away. Mm-hmm. And really and truly, the only moments that I had that were stress-free in my life for the better part of 30 plus years were those moments when I was on stage. Because I am more comfortable standing on a stage in front of thousands of people than I am standing in a room with 3, especially if I don't know them. And so it's a unique situation. The stage is home for me. It's comfortable. I am relaxed. I'm in my element. I'm there to entertain. I'm going to make you laugh. And so when you stand on that stage, you get that instant feedback from the audience, and you've got people rolling in the aisles, that's one of the greatest highs that you could ever experience. And I always tell people, the most incredible pharmacy in the world is the one that's right between your ears, because you have the ability to make yourself high on life if you know how. And entertainers learn that skill. We learn how to psych ourselves up. We learn how to change our state of being so that we can get into the mindset and the body and the spirituality that we need to be in order to make those people laugh and to entertain them and do our thing. And so those are skills which you can learn. You can teach those skills to people. And so I have a ritual that I do even today, and I've been doing this for my whole career. But I call it grounding. But I have this little ritual where I spin around 3 times and I say my little intuition for my little intention for that particular performance. And then I connect with the audience through the curtain. And I allow that wonderful energy that's swirling in the theater, because everyone's anticipating the show's getting ready to start. They're all excited. They can't wait for the curtain to go up and for the performance to begin. So all of that positive energy that's swirling around the venue, you can tap into that. And I've learned how to use that to change my state and make everything that is going on in my life completely disappear. And it's a very, very powerful skill. I've taught this to CEOs of Fortune 500 companies. When you have the ability to change your state at any time. Let me give you a real world example. Let's say you're married, and let's say you and your wife are having an argument.
Yeah.
Being in a there you go. Being in a heated argument in that moment, if both people are heated at that moment, then we all know what the result is going to be. It's just going to be nasty, ugly, and nothing's going to come out of it that's life-affirming or positive. But when one of the two has the ability to change their state, control their emotions, and they know how to process the information that they are receiving in a non-threatening, non-attack mode, it can be life-changing. Not only that, but when you add conflict resolution skills into this, you can actually learn a lot from the arguments that you get involved with that will make you a better person. And these are some of the in-depth skills that I teach at lifeskillsmasterclass.com.
What I've learned myself in the last few months through an ADHD group, and it was great. Our teacher had a PhD in psychology, and she actually had ADHD, so she understood, everything. And she had some interesting principles, and one of them was, I think it's like the sacred moment or sacred pause. It's like, we talk about you're going to argue. If I'm getting upset about something, if I take a second to pause and channel that energy and let it go, oh, wow, this is a way better process instead of like, okay, I'm really upset that someone cut me off in traffic, let's say, if I pause and think about that and think of, well, what is it going to benefit me being annoyed? It's going to ruin my rest of my day? Then maybe I'm going to be the one cutting off a person next and everything. So I think that really resonates. I would totally agree with that.
I actually teach that in my course. And it's something that I call redirectional thought therapy. And what I do is I teach a person the very first thing you should do is to stop and put a little space between you, your personal feelings, and what's going on emotionally inside of you, and the problem that you're being confronted with. And it's in that space, which is silence, that you're able to regain control of your emotions. And through that, you then put yourself back in the driver's seat, because you can then choose what your next step is going to be, instead of defaulting to the pre-programmed neurolinguistic pathway that you've taught yourself your entire life. We all have a series of pre-programmed responses that we default to whenever certain stimuli appear in our life. And so when someone threatens us or gets angry or comes at us in a negative way, we instantly default to this pre-programmed response, which is usually exactly what you don't want to do.
Yeah.
Part of what I teach in the class is how to rewire your brain from defaulting to this series of pre-programmed responses and creating new neural net pathways where you can choose an array of options of how you want to respond. That is a life-changing skill. If you just learn that from my course, you can absolutely change your life in so many incredible ways.
Yeah, it's because we have that lizard brain, that Neanderthal brain, that's fight or flight. And so that's kind of what we're used to going to. Brain. Oh, yes.
Yeah, it's our primate monkey brain, still exists in the back. It's still there. And when we get triggered and we go into survival mode, which is really what a heated argument is, then a lot of that sort of thinking takes over. And that's what causes a lot of suffering in people's lives.
So I think that's a great thing to learn. And I think sometimes when we're learning things, we're excited, but then it can be overwhelming too, to learn all these things and creating habits. I think that one sounds like a really interesting one to start off with. What is like just the real vague version of what someone would do to get into that kind of practice?
It's a great question. Over the years, I've learned how to best teach people this information. As I mentioned before, I have a whole team of educators and psychologists on my staff that I work with to develop all of this content. And through them, over the years, I've learned what's the right way to teach this material and what's the wrong way to teach this material. And one of the things we learned is that people's attention spans are getting shorter and shorter and shorter. So when I redesigned this new version of Life Skills Masterclass, we broke it up into 30-minute weekly chunks. And so used to, I gave you access to all the content at one time, and you could go in there and digest it however you wanted at your own pace. And I thought that was a great thing. Turns out it's not. So what we do now is we send you one 30-minute class per week, and I teach you 3 important concepts in each one of those classes. And then I give you the next 6 days for you to take those concepts and integrate them into your life and learn to use them and try them. And this has been so much more successful. People really like this version of the course. And the next piece of the puzzle is I created an internal community inside of my course, which can only be accessed by the paying members of the course. And that has become a really important part of this too, because you get to connect with like-minded people who are going through the same things and are also at the same place in the course as you, and you get a chance to develop relationships with them and talk to them and have open conversations. And I'm in there every day as well, answering people's questions and that sort of thing. And so I think that we have finally figured out the right formula. And I really think that it's bite-sized chunks, sending you bite-sized chunks per week, and then allowing you that time to, I always say, I'm planting the seeds. That's what this class does, is it plants the seeds, but it's up to you to water it and make it grow over the next 6 days.
I think that's a good segue into a tagline you came up with that I absolutely love. Skills, not pills.
Pills.
That is amazing because it is so true. I've gone to a number of different counselors and psychiatrists, and sometimes they want to give you pills. And
I would say 98% of the time you're going.
I was trying to be PC
with a prescription.
I've even dealt with that myself, and sometimes you need it, and other times like I want something more holistic, or maybe there's a natural version of it, CBD, like or something. I know you have some CBD products and stuff as well. It's funny how those things seem kind of out there and crazy, but it's okay to take a pill from Big Pharma. And again, I take some medications. It does help me, but I've also had issues for medication as well.
I want to put this out there so people that are watching this really understand my position. There is nothing wrong with taking medication. If medication works for you and it improves your life, I'm all for it.
Yes.
But medication is a tool. And the problem is we, in the United States specifically, we've become a pill-popping nation. Whenever something happens in our life, instead of dealing with it, we look for a pill bottle. And we want that magic pill. And I tell people, if you're thinking about taking my course and you're the kind of person that's looking for a magic pill, don't even bother. Because I'm not the guy for you, and this course is not going to help you. Go find a psychotherapist that will refer you to a psychiatrist that will write that script. That's not what I'm about. What I'm about, it came from me taking every pill that was out there. For 20 years, I was on all the medication. I took everything from Zoloft to Lexapro to even lithium. And some really, really horrible side effects I had to deal with over the years. And I just got to a point to where I was like, this is no way to live. And it made my life even harder to function because a lot of that medication, especially the stronger ones, can turn you into what I call a zombie. You really couldn't think, and you were just kind of like,
You're not yourself.
You're not yourself at all. Your personality is muted, and you're just kind of a third-rate version of who you really, really, truly are. And at some point, I became self-aware of this, and I was like, there's got to be a better way. That is when I began really looking for skills. Because when the pill bottle's empty, or you can't get another prescription, those skills will always be there, and no one can take them away from you. And so that's why I'm such a proponent of skills. Now, you mentioned my CBD line. Let me tell you something about that. People ask me all the time, well, why do you sell CBD if, you're this big guy that teaches all these incredible skills? Well, I'm going to tell you why. Because when you come to me, you're usually stressed out, anxious, and at the end of your rope, and you can't handle life anymore. And you need something that is going to take the edge off while you are beginning to change your life and learn new skills. So I have found, I don't like taking pills, I don't like taking medication, but I have found what works for me personally is CBD oil. And I take CBD tincture every single day. I take 3 drops under my tongue first thing in the mornings when I get up. And it just helps me. It just helps helps me to take the edge off and allow me to function on a much better level. I can handle things so much easier. The little details don't tick me off. I don't get angry. I don't get stressed out. And so I've been using CBD for many years now. And when we launched this new program, I'd been thinking about this for a while. But the problem was I couldn't find a company that would be transparent with their lab results because I only wanted the highest quality CBD, and I wanted their lab results to be third-party tested, and I wanted it to be publicly available information. None of the CBD companies will do that. So it took me forever to find a company to work with. I finally found a company in Michigan called Rosno Farms, and it's a mom and pop operation. The guy actually grows the hemp. It's hemp-based, not marijuana-based.
Yeah.
And he actually grows the hemp on his family farm, and they take that hemp every year and they turn it into CBD products. And I convinced them that they needed to get it third-party tested and publish their lab results. And the results came back amazing. And so I formed a partnership with them, and now we offer the CBD oil to our peeps because, like I said, before you learn these skills that I'm teaching, you just need that help to calm the storm down and just allow you to be able to handle internally what's going on externally around you. And for me, being the all-natural nut that I am, I have found that hemp-derived CBD oil, when it's processed at the highest quality, is really the best solution.
Yeah, I use CBD tincture sometimes as well. And I live in Oregon, so it's been legal for quite some time. And is it legal in Vegas, in Nevada?
Oh, yes, it's legal. And CBD products are legal pretty much everywhere. We can ship them by mail, all that kind of stuff. And it's a really popular product. And I'll tell you something that's really interesting to me, and I don't know why, and I don't know what spurred this. I believe it was a study that the University of Ohio published that showed the effects that CBD has on anxiety and stress. About a year ago, our sales exploded. And we've never been able to really figure out why that is, but I think it was because of the release of that study. And people now feel like that it's safe to use.
I don't know, again, a lot about that, but I do know about different supplements, vitamins, and things like that are tested by third parties and everything, because you never know what you're going to get sometimes, especially with CBD and different products like that. So the fact that you have that, again, the transparency. So you are what you preach, which is definitely appreciative to me to hear that, and then just everyone out there, because again, people often just want to push something and no, you need this and it's the best thing ever. Well, why do I need it? And is it really that good?
Yeah. And what I find out is people will take the CBD oil, they'll take it for a while. And then once they start transforming because they're learning new skills and they're applying these skills into their life, I have particularly find this to be true with my coaching clients who I have intimate one-on-one communication with on a regular basis. I find that the CBD oil goes away after a while. They stop using it because they don't need it anymore. And when the brain finds another solution to solve a problem and it works, it will automatically use that default from now on, and anything else will just fade away. And so I find that, especially with my coaching clients, they only use it for a few months. Usually within a 6 or 7 month period, they stop using it because they just feel like they're in a better place.
Well, yeah, they're graduating to the next level, which is great. So they're moving through your system, then it's working. One thing I'm interested with you is obviously you're quite the entrepreneur. You're this magician. I'm impressed with all these things you have going on around you. So what size of team do you have?
Well, we work virtually.
Virtually.
So I've developed a pretty much virtual team. I have a lot of different people that I work with. There's probably, on a regular basis, there's probably 50 people that are a part of my core team, but I don't use all of them on every project. So whenever I'm producing a project, so I'll give you a little sneak peek. This is something we're working on right now, and I really shouldn't show you this because it's not out yet. So we're developing a version of my course, and this is the packaging that it will come in. And when you open it, there's a thumb drive that goes right here in this slot. And the entire course will be on this thumb drive. And we're putting together a package like this to sell at my live seminars. And then we're also talking with QVC right now about selling this on there as well. And so whenever I start a new project like that one, for example, I go to my roster of team members that I use on a regular basis, and I go through and pick the people that I think are most important to work on this project, and I assemble a little micro team. And so that's how it works. It usually starts with the educators and the psychologists. That's usually who I go to first and say, I want to develop a course on this, and let's talk about this. And then we go through and develop the proper techniques and skills.
So it's kind of it's really a kind of a plug and play model where you have people that are really good experts in certain areas, and for that particular project, you say, okay, this is kind of my project scope. These are the people that I think would be great at that, and kind of go with it.
That's exactly what I do, and I found over the years that to be the most efficient way to do things. So I have a plethora of people. We're right now designing the new version of my corporate seminar, because I do a lot of corporate work where I go into companies and teach their employees how to manage stress in the workplace, which is a huge problem. $300 billion a year is lost by American corporations because of a lack of productivity, employee turnover, and communication issues at work. And so companies are now realizing that if they teach their employees skills of how to manage their stress and anxiety in the workplace, they actually get more work done. And so I've been doing that for a while now, and it's growing and getting bigger and bigger and bigger. If anyone watching wants more information on any of this stuff, they can go to stephendiamond.com. That's where you'll find all of the information. Reach out to us. My team will get you whatever information you need.
I also will have show notes with links to as much information that I can for you, and then we'll promote it online as well to make sure we get the word out there for you. And I do appreciate you leaning now into that stress at work, because that's actually one of the topics I wanted to talk to you about, because it's definitely not taught. And so, stress at work is not taught, and I feel like there should be more programs out there. And so your program now, is that information on your website right now? People want to learn more about that?
Yeah, there's a whole page on my website. If you go to stephendiamond.com, you'll see a tab up there that says corporate training, and you can click on that. It'll give you all the details. And also, I want to mention to all your listeners, just a couple weeks ago, I launched a brand new webinar that will teach you how to stop your panic attacks instantly. It's free. There's nothing to buy. But in this 20-minute video training, I will teach you 3 actionable skills that you can use when you think you're about to have a panic attack, or if you're in the middle of a panic attack. I'll teach you how to stop it instantly. And that has been incredibly popular. I've been shocked at the response to this webinar. So go to stephendiamond.com. Right underneath my book, you'll see me holding my book. There is a little banner that says, learn how to stop your panic attacks. Click that, it'll take you to the webinar.
And I know that you've also recently launched your podcast. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, in March, when we launched the course, I came out with a brand new podcast called What the Tigers Taught Me. And in this podcast, I use the term tiger as a metaphor for all of those things that lurk and creep and stalk you in the night. Things like stress, anxiety, depression, and even shyness. And I cover a whole host of topics. Each episode, we deal with topics. For example, I have a whole episode on grief, what to do when someone you love dies suddenly. And that whole episode came out because my sister was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, and 30 days later, she was dead.
Oh.
And so I went through that whole process of finding out your loved one has stage 4 cancer, and then rushing to their bedside, and then, in just weeks, poof, she's gone. And so I really went through all of those emotions, and I really had to figure out, how am I going to handle this? How do you deal with this? And so that podcast came out of that. I have a very popular podcast on triggers. how to deal with triggers. When you get triggered by something, we all have triggers. We all have things that little pet peeves, and people can say certain things that just, flick that switch in us and make us crazy. So I have a whole podcast about triggers. I have a whole podcast about panic attacks. So there's all of these core strategies that I teach you in each podcast. And I really focus on giving the people who listen to my show real value. I really dig deep and in each episode teach you real things that you can do that will really make a difference in whatever issue it is that we're talking about.
The episode that I listened to was about finding a counselor or, a therapist.
How to find the right therapist for you.
Exactly. And it's definitely, it's kind of like dating, this back and forth, and not everyone's right for you. But I think you said in the podcast that you had 37 different counselors. Is that correct?
I did. I went through 37 different therapists over my entire therapeutic career, if you want to call it that. And one of the things I teach you in that episode is how to audition your therapist. Because coming from a show business background, I suddenly realized that they work for me. And you have to, I'm the one paying the money. I'm there on my own volition. No one's forcing me to be here. So I was like, wait a minute. I should be sitting in front of someone that resonates with me, someone that connects with me, someone that I like, someone that has the same values and belief system as I do. And I don't want someone that's just going to be a yes man, that's just going to go, yeah, you're right, and just listen to you and nod their head and watch the clock. That's not what I'm talking about. In fact, I fire those people. I actually like a therapist who will challenge my belief system, who will challenge my thoughts, my thinking, who will come back at me and say, well, let's look at that from a different perspective. What about this? And I think those are the most valuable therapists. And so over the years, I learned how to audition the therapist and how to find what to look for in a therapist, how to make sure that that therapist is a good match for you. And I saw my very first therapist when I was 8 years old. So I even talked to you a little bit in that podcast, as you'll remember, about how to select the right therapist for your children. So that's an important section as well. I actually opened the podcast with talking about that because that's where it all began for me.
When you've experienced everything that you've experienced and you've had, 37 different people that you've talked to.
I'm not currently in therapy at the moment, but since the 30s, I think I've had 3 more.
Okay. So we're at about even 40 or something. So, okay. The one question I have to come back to earlier about was the time when, how do you say his name? Bhagavan or Bhagavan?
Bhagavan. You can call him Doc Antle.
Doc Antle. When Doc Antle tried to kill you. Let's come back to that here briefly. Let's hear that story.
Well, I tell this story in Tiger King too, but I'll tell you. So one night I was asleep at the Buckingham Zoological Park and I heard something going on in a trailer outside the window. And I went outside and I caught Bhagavan by himself late at night with a flashlight, a few tools, ripping open a big black brick covered in hefty trash bags and duct tape. And he was ripping open this brick. And when he ripped it open, I peeked over his shoulder. It was filled with cash. And I startled him, and he grabbed a screwdriver and flipped around and grabbed my throat and shoved me up against the building and shoved that screwdriver right up my throat and said, if you ever mention this, you'll never see another sunrise. And that was the first time that he tried to seriously hurt me.
The first time, yes. So that means there's more.
Oh yeah, he's a violent guy. He has a real serious temper. The Bhagavan Antle or the Doc Antle. He's not a doctor, by the way. Never has been. Can hardly spell. But he is this kind of character that the persona that you see, the safari guy, the animal guy that you see on television, is not the real Bhagavan. That is a character that he has developed over the years and portrays on television. But the truth is, behind the scenes, he has a red hot temper. And when he doesn't get his way, there's going to be hell to pay.
The last question I have for you, I mean, I could talk to you forever. You have so many interesting stories and just showbiz, but also, we both are connecting, kind of on the mental health aspect of it. In your touring days as a magician, I guess what's one of the wildest stories you've had? Maybe it was with some other celebrities. Maybe it was with...
There's a lot of things that happen over the course of a 30-year career touring around the world, shipping animals all over the world. But I'll tell you about the very first time I went to South America. We left Miami. There was 80 people and a whole plane full of lions and tigers underneath. And we took off from Miami and we're flying to Lima, Peru. And while we were in the air flying to Lima, a civil war broke out in the city of Lima. And the poor people were uprising against the government because the government was taking rights away from them. Kind of sounds familiar, doesn't it? And so they were having their rights stripped away from them. And the poor people had just had enough. And they decided, we're going to form our own army and overthrow the government. And they did. And this all happened while we were in the air. When we landed, as we were flying into Lima, we could look out the windows of the airplane and the entire city was on fire. And we could see explosions going off in the distance and, every once in a while. And they were car bombs. And they were blowing up power plants. They were blowing up police stations. They were blowing up the or the president's mansion. They were, doing all kinds of crazy things. So when we get to the airport is desolate. There's no one there. All the lights are on. The plane lands. And in Lima, you land on the tarmac, but there really wasn't a gate at that time that would go up to the airplane. They literally just stop the plane, open the door, and you walk down the steps and go into the building. And so when we got into the airport, we noticed we couldn't find anyone. All the lights were on. The TVs were on. It was just but there were no people. So
Spooky.
We're told to go through, there was buses waiting for us on the outside of the airport. So we go through the airport, we get our luggage, and we go through we go into the bus. And just about the time we all get loaded onto the bus, the entire front side of the airport explodes. And it rocks the bus like this. And you have all of these people inside this bus screaming, and the windows on the side of the bus blew out because of the blast. We were covered in glass, and we were all on the floor, and the girls were screaming and crying. Some of the guys, too. I think I was one of them. And everyone was terrified at what was going on. And the next thing I knew, the bus just took off. And we go into the middle of the city, and we go to the hotel that we're supposed to be staying at, which is a big Hilton in Lima, Peru. And the military had seized the hotel as a command center. So now we're in a strange city we've never been before, and we have no hotel. And the entire city is being blown up, and it's in the middle of a civil war. That, my friend, is one of the most craziest, not the craziest I can't talk about on the air. But
sure.
It is one of the craziest nights of my life.
So I'm assuming you did not perform your show?
Believe it or not, we did. We postponed the show a week, and it took us forever to find our cats because we couldn't get a hold of the animals because you couldn't find anybody. And we were finally able to get our animals and get the equipment and stuff from the show. And that took us about a week, so we delayed the show. And then once we got all of our equipment and the cats and all that kind of stuff, then we were able to do the show again. We opened the show, and believe it or not, it was relatively successful.
The show must go on is indeed true.
Must go on. Yeah, and we were there for a couple months, and we sold out almost every show. I think the first couple weeks we were about 50% full, but then after that, word had spread, and the shows were very successful.
Wow. Well, again, I appreciate your time today.
My pleasure.
I'm going to have to interview you again at some point because I could talk to you forever. It's just so fascinating.
Would love to come back and talk about more things. I'm sure you have more questions about stress as it relates to entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
Which is,
we can leave this thing on for like 5 hours.
But I would love to talk to you about it sometime.
Thank you again. And please tell people again where they can find you online. And we'll put all that information on our show notes as well.
The easiest way is StephenDiamond.com. That's StephenDiamond.com. Or my main site is LifeSkillsMasterClass.com.
Perfect. And I like to end the show with, remember, you're not alone in life or business. Thank you.
That's correct.